think it's 8:30. Call the meeting in order. The Wilmington City Council for this pre-agenda meeting. Let me do a roll call here. The Mayor Pro Tem is absent today. Councilman Reinbach, are you here? Yes. Councilmember Anderson is away. Councilman Barnett, are you here? Councilmember Spears, are you here?
As far as I know.
Okay. Councilmember Waddell, are you here? Okay. And the chair is here. Okay. We have several presentations tomorrow evening. C1 is a consent agenda. C1 is approval of the minutes. C2A is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 3-year grant agreement with UNCW Research Foundation, the annual amount of $50,000 to enhance economic development activity within the city of Wilmington. C2B is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 3-year grant agreement with YWCA Lower Cape Fear in the annual amount of $50,000 to enhance economic development activity within the city of Wilmington. C3 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 4-year contract with the Cape Fear Council of Governments for staffing and administrative support for the continuum of care. C4 is a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2023 through 2027 consolidated plan and fiscal year 2022 through 2023 annual action plan for the use of community development block grant and home funds. C5 has been pulled according to the manager, correct? C6 is a resolution authorizing the conditional release of drainage easement within the Riverlight Single Family Phase 6. Public hearings PH1 is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 1.08 acres of land located at 202 Beasley Avenue from R15 residential to R7 CD residential conditional district for the 3 residential lots containing 3 duplex structures. PH2 is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 2.23 acres of land located at 4127, 4211, 4219, and 4221 Cedar Avenue from R10 medium density single dwelling district to R5 CD medium density mixed residential conditional district for a 9-lot single dwelling residential subdivision. PH3, manager has indicated that the folks have continued that one to August the 2nd. 01 is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations to the Public Improvements Equipment Fund for NCEM Emergency Management Transportation Infrastructure Resiliency Fund grant in the amount of $482,000 for the purchase of generators, transport vehicles, safety equipment, fuel storage and transportation containers, and manual transfer switch installation. 02A is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a supplemental agreement with the North Carolina Department of Transportation to accept $1,220,000 in additional surface transportation block grant direct attributable funds with a required local match of $305,000 and extend the project completion date to December 31, 2024 for the Hooker Road multi-use path project. 02B is the ordinance making supplemental appropriations to the amount of $1,525,000 for the Hooker Road multi-use path project in the Streets and Sidewalks Fund. 03A is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a supplemental agreement with the North Carolina Department of Transportation to accept $530,000 in additional surface transportation block grant direct attributable funds with the required local match of $132,500 and extend the project completion date to December 31, 2024 for the Hinton Avenue multi-use path project. 03B is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations in the amount of $662,500 for the Hinton Avenue multi-use path project in the Streets and Sidewalk Funds. And then 04A is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a supplemental agreement with the North Carolina Department of Transportation to accept $650,000 additional surface transportation block grant direct attributable funds with the required local match of $162,500 for the Wrightsville Avenue and Greenville Avenue intersection improvement project. And then 04B is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations in the amount of $812,500 for the Wrightsville Avenue and Greenville Avenue intersection improvements project in the Streets and Sidewalks Fund. Resolutions are 1A is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 5-year contract with the Wilmington Regional Film Commission incorporating the annual amount of $130,000 for professional services related to enhancing economic development activity within the city of Wilmington.
Mr. Mayor, if I might interrupt,
Yes, sir.
this is, according to new statute, a situation where board members who represent the city on these individual boards will have to excuse themselves. Just a reminder that you will need to excuse yourself from R1A and R1B, and the Mayor Pro Tem will need to excuse herself from R1C.
Okay. R1B is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 5-year contract with Wilmington Business Development, the annual amount of $107,500 for the professional services related to enhancing economic development activity within the city of Wilmington. And then R1C is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 5-year contract with Wilmington Downtown, Inc. in the annual amount of $100,000 for professional services related to enhancing economic development activity within the city of Wilmington. R2 is a resolution authorizing sealed bid sale of 1110 Castle Street. R3 is a resolution authorizing termination of the lease agreement for the 4th floor of 115 North 3rd Street. And then R4 is a resolution declaring real property located at 905 North 10th Street as surplus property and authorizing conveyance to New Hanover County. And then R5 is a resolution awarding a construction contract to T.A. Loving Company in the amount of $910,660 for the Greenfield Lake Spillway Rehabilitation Project. And then R6 is a resolution in support of Wilmington Housing Authority grant application. And then reports, RP1 is report of the Valuations Committee. And that is all for this agenda.
Mr. Mayor, we have a presentation to do for you this morning, but before we do that, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce 2 new key staff members that have joined since the last time that you met. First of all, Chad McEwen, who is our 3rd Deputy City Manager. Chad, will you please stand? Chad comes to us from Pender County. Most of you know him one way or the other, probably as well as you do me just about. But he has been on staff now for a full 2 weeks, so we're going to go ahead and just inundate him with everything we can this week.
Congratulations.
In the audience, Ms. Linda Painter. Linda is our new Planning and Development Director. She comes to us from Connecticut and also has been with us for 2 weeks, so she's fair game as well, and now that she's on board for 2 weeks. But just wanted to let you know that we'd made appointments and gotten those folks in. Leaves us with 1 appointment left on the key staff members, which is the fill in the vacancy of Tony McEwen, and we should be able to announce something on that very soon. So thank you.
Very good.
Mr. Mayor, a couple of the council members met with staff regarding some complaints that they were hearing from the public regarding panhandling. And so staff met with these council members and has devised a plan to be able to address some of the issues associated with public safety and with panhandling. And it's going to be a tag team report this morning. We're going to start with Jared Patterson to be able to, thank you, Jared, to be able to overview this item for us. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I want to begin with a quick overview of the presentation that we've prepared for you. I'm going to begin with an introduction to the topic. Followed by that, Mr. Joy is going to give us a legal overview. Chief Euler is going to give us an overview of enforcement-related matters. Mr. Moten is going to come and speak to social support services related to panhandling, and then I'll sum everything up and talk about some action items that we're prepared to take right now if directed to do so by council. We've got 3 slides to introduce this topic to you. First, I want to begin by pointing out that panhandling is a multifaceted issue. Food insecurity, our unsheltered populations, social support services, mental health, public safety, traffic flow, law enforcement, all of these issues come together and converge on the topic of panhandling. In addition to that, we have seen a significant increase in traffic and pedestrian presence in our medians and roadways, things which are associated with the kind of population growth that we've been seeing in our community. We have seen concerns expressed from residents on this issue. I've seen it in the communications office. Every newsletter that we send out now has a business reply envelope and a detachable resident response form. We want to make it as easy as possible for our residents to be able to communicate their concerns, issues that they care about, their comments to the city so that we can be responsive. Looking back at our most recent spring 2022 newsletter, 15 responses have come in specific to the issue of panhandling. And we saw with that a variety of concerns, from traffic impacts to the sentiment that we want to help, but I don't know how to really identify what needs I'm seeing in these individuals, and how do I really help that. We have a robust system of social support options in our community. There are services for the needs that are demonstrated by persons that are associated with panhandling, and we want to make sure that these services are well supported and that we can help our residents avail themselves of these services. Finally, we're going to be presenting you with a comprehensive approach. Because panhandling is a multifaceted issue, it really requires a multifaceted response. This is something where we have kind of a both-and situation where enforcement goes hand in hand with social support. And then finally, you're going to see that there are some things that we can't do as a city, but there are some things that we can do, and that's really what we're trying to do in this presentation as a staff, is to show you those actionable things that we're able to do right now as a city to help address this issue. I've got some pictures for you. These are taken from our traffic cameras in the city. It highlights some of the issues that we're seeing right now in the community, where you have individuals who are out in traffic, in some cases impeding traffic. And this kind of gives you just a visual setting of the stage. And then finally, by way of introduction, we can really break down the issues and the problems associated with panhandling into two broad categories. The first of these is that panhandling is not a sustainable solution to meeting real needs. It may provide for a momentary fix, just by very nature of the activity, provides for a momentary fix, but it doesn't continue to meet needs on a longer-term basis. And it also is not connected to real systems of social support that can address root causes. So as we look towards the solutions that we're able to bring to these problems, we see that we can partner with the public to create a simple and easy way to donate to a constellation of nonprofits that will meet the physical, mental, and economic needs that underlie issues related to panhandling. And we can also connect individuals to the social services that they need. There is outreach work underway now in our community to direct people from the streets to the services that they need, which fills a critical gap. The second category of problems associated with panhandling is that panhandling can also create other problems along the way, as we saw in the pictures on the previous slide, issues such as impeding traffic. And Mr. Joy will go into a host of other related issues that sometimes compound the problem of panhandling. What can we do to address these problems? First, we can enforce existing laws, and we can direct necessary resources to those enforcement efforts. And then finally, we can identify ways to enhance the outreach activities taking place right now in the community to direct individuals from the street to the services that they need. And with that introduction, I'm going to invite Mr. Joy to come and give us a legal overview of the topic.
Thanks, Jared. Mayor and Council, the purpose of this portion, this legal portion, is not only to advise you, but it's also to help our citizens and the public understand just what the city can do and what the city can't do. And for that reason, I'm leading with a quote from the Supreme Court of Kentucky, but it's an excellent quote. This hangs on the door of my office, and it's there to remind all of our attorneys and legal staff just how powerful and important our First Amendment is. And I will not read the quote. People are perfectly capable of seeing it themselves, but the courts mean it when they say it's not there for us to talk about the weather. The goal of the First Amendment is not peace and comfort. In fact, peace and comfort are not even necessarily a priority for the First Amendment. And when we are talking about panhandling, we are talking about First Amendment activity. Now, if you will allow me, I want to talk about some of the complaints that we see coming in, and I call them complaints, but sometimes they're just comments from the public. The public tends to mix and intermingle different things, some of them crimes, some of them not crimes, all under the label of panhandling. When we're talking about panhandling purely, we're talking about someone who is asking for an immediate donation right then, right there. That is protected speech. I'm going to say that several more times during this presentation, or my portion of this presentation, so that folks are absolutely clear. Panhandling, asking for that donation, is protected speech. However, many of the emails, comments, calls, they go into many other areas. Folks talk about impeding traffic, littering, communicating threats. I have a list up there of some of the most popular. That is not all-inclusive, but I think it is very demonstrative so that folks understand we're dealing with a very varied issue. So let's talk about the pure speech part first. This is panhandling itself. And here is the leading case. I've got several cases up there. I'm not going to go into an analysis of each case. Those are the most important cases for what we're dealing with today. And Reynolds v. Middleton, which is a Fourth Circuit case, for those legal scholars out there, we are in the Fourth Circuit. The cases from that Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, they are binding in our area. And the Fourth Circuit has said there is no question that panhandling and solicitation are protected speech. Not only that, streets and medians are considered traditional public forums. Therefore, if the city or any local government or any state government feels that it needs to regulate that panhandling, it must do so very carefully. And generally speaking, a city nor a state, none of them can just generally ban panhandling in the streets or the medians. What can we do? We can enforce non-speech related laws. Here's a list of several of them. I'm not saying that this is some de facto means of regulating panhandling. No, panhandling regulation is really just a de facto means of stopping what we don't want to happen, which is someone getting hurt or killed. In that very Reynolds v. Middleton case, that was a county in Virginia that regulated panhandling, not because it had an animus against panhandlers, because their police chief had been there 40 years and he had seen an uptick in traffic, he'd seen an uptick in panhandling on the medians, and he said in that case where they were looking at the ordinance that the Fourth Circuit struck down, he said, I want to take action before a tragedy occurs. This is where we get back to the First Amendment, not making things comfortable. It's difficult. It is very difficult. But what we can do, instead of regulating solicitation or panhandling specifically, we can enforce the laws that really get to what we are concerned about, which is traffic stopping, traffic safety. Sometimes those other crimes that people report come into play, whether it's communicating threats or otherwise, we can enforce the laws that govern that. Now, here's the guidance that I am providing not only to City Council and the City Manager and the Chief, but it's also what I'm putting out there for the public so they understand the cases that we deal with and that they understand City Council cannot just go out there and ban panhandling. The first guidance is we need to update our city code. There's a lot in our city code. We have done a lot of work on it over the past few years. We have had to focus on our land development code, which has taken a lot of city resources. Now is the time we need to go back and we need to amend our panhandling ordinance, which the public like to make me aware that we've already banned panhandling. Yes, and that ordinance goes back to a time before these cases that said we can't. We need to amend it for clarity's sake so that the public does not look at our code and go, well, why aren't they enforcing that? Well, they're not enforcing it because we can't meet our burden of proof, and it is our burden of proof in front of the Fourth Circuit or the Supreme Court, not with the case law we have today. In fact, if it wasn't for that Austin v. Reagan case that just came out earlier this year in April, I would be telling you that most likely we would be under strict scrutiny, and we absolutely couldn't do it. What I'm telling you is we have to enforce what we have on the book. That's what the Fourth Circuit tells us. We have to gather data. If that doesn't work, then we can possibly go back and regulate panhandling specifically, but we haven't got the data and the evidence to back that up right now, but we're working on it, and we're going to work hard. In fact, I want to ask if there are any questions, and then I want to turn it over to the chief, who will tell you about the enforcement plan that WPD has. Any questions on the legal side before I turn it over to the chief? With that said, I'm going to ask Chief Euler to step up.
Good morning. Okay, sorry. So what does the police department plan to do about some of these issues that we're having? One of the big things we're going to do is we're going to start dedicating resources to focus on enforcing existing laws. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. One of the things we're going to start doing is enforcing existing laws and dedicating resources to handle that. I don't want to get into specifics as to how we're going to do that because of, obviously, it's tradecraft issues. However, we're also going to focus on some of the high traffic areas using some of these complaints that we have to focus our resources to make sure we're being very specific and very surgical about how we go about this. We're not looking to just go ahead and arbitrarily go out and charge everyone. We want to make sure that we have met the standards for the statutes, both city code and state statutes, when we charge someone. And unfortunately, that's about all I can talk about that. Anyone have any questions? And I believe Mr. Moten's coming up next.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. Mr. Patterson did a good job of lifting much of the content that you'll see, so some of it will be repetitive. What you see here are two depictions of Greenville, South Carolina. And as was mentioned earlier, panhandling is complex, is multifaceted. There are truly individuals in dire circumstances where begging is an acute need. It is believed by many that there are beggars that pursue it as more of a quasi-occupation, not to sound heartless about that. What we found and determined in talking to Greenville, South Carolina, has been a quick conversation amongst a few staff members, is that this effort, the sign on your left says, "Keep your change, be the change." There's a QR code that individuals can scan. Then there's a better way to help panhandlers. In scanning the internet, looking at communities, we saw a variety of communities post signs similar to this. However, they were more regulatory, meaning they looked more like an enforcement sign, which seemed to have a cold feel to it. It didn't have the compassion conveyed. In talking to Greenville, South Carolina, they said they worked on this effort for over a year. It is community-wide, it's a regional approach. As it was said earlier, it's complex and there are many facets to this issue. I just want to jump into some of the social support elements of this process, and I'll end my portion of the presentation with some proposed locations where signage could be erected. So in looking at not only the literature written, but communities that are working on this work, they've indicated that panhandling has a tendency to self-perpetuate. Caring communities, individuals discover that if you go to this location, you're going to get resources. So the caring communities like ours tend to beget more panhandling. It's a community-wide issue. It's complex. It may be mental health, economic, education, a number of factors that can drive someone or encourage them to go to the various intersections to seek economic resources. Nonprofits, while robust in the region here, also have limited funding. We still find that there are limited emergency and other kinds of housing options that can treat the whole person to perhaps give them a more sustainable long-term solution where you're not going day to day on the intersection. Again, more support for physical needs associated with panhandling, engaging that community to determine what those needs are should be part of the process. We also find that, and other communities have found, that donating to nonprofits through some vehicle creates a more sustainable platform to render aid and assistance for those individuals that perhaps you can move them to some permanent, improved condition. Some aspects of the panhandling, which unsheltered, chronically underemployed, may be a component of those individuals. When we think about who needs to be working with the city, we believe one of our partners needs to be the continuum of care. It's primarily an administrative, fiscal agent, and program evaluation agent. However, one aspect of that group is the Tri-County Housing Interagency Council, which includes nonprofits working to serve individuals in Brunswick, Pender, New Hanover, and Wilmington. We need to fine-tune our approach with those partners to make sure that we have their support, and not only their support, but they're in position to best render aid, educate and engage the community regarding this effort. And it's our hope that you would agree that directing individuals who want to assist panhandlers to provide those resources to the nonprofits that focus on shelter and physical and mental and overall economic well-being. This is for illustration purposes, but so far right now, we tried to design a sign that would be for Wilmington. We believe it's important that we lead with compassion, and that it can, and also we believe there are individuals who have a deep concern for the welfare of their fellow man, and they're looking for opportunities to contribute and support those individuals. So our signs, there's no shame in borrowing something from another community, but we're certainly copying from Greenville, South Carolina. But again, we would have a location that could direct individuals how to give. As you see at the very bottom, a URL code, wilmingtonnc.gov, Better Way. We believe there is a better way to help individuals and lift them up in a way that is not short-term, but long-term. I want to touch on some of the locations. These locations are ones that members of council identified, as well as staff identified, as been fairly frequent locations for panhandling and also disruption of traffic. Sometimes there are externalities or residual issues, such as well-meaning individuals dropping off food, water, and such. And many of the panhandlers don't have transportation, so you're simply having to haul all this around. And so sometimes there's debris and litter left at the sites. Would like to just touch on some of our major gateways. You can see two major intersections at Oleander. We focused on Wooster, 16th and 17th. Market Street's an area of emphasis. These also are driven by calls and information from the community. Roundel at Carr, Market at New Center. I'm just jumping around a little bit on this. But my intention is to demonstrate to you that we're trying to spread it out in the community. I think not only do you implement this as a pilot program, but we have to assess how effective it is. And in talking to Greenville, South Carolina, the community there said they have information. It's just started. You know, when I say just started, not like within the last few months, but they have a record of the giving, and they need to also assess what they're doing. What's interesting is, again, when you look at panhandling in communities across the country, many communities are struggling with this issue. The balance between law enforcement, and also the human service needs that clearly are interwoven into it. One community that we looked at also was Issaquah, Washington. It's a suburb of Seattle. And their program is Follow Your Heart, Give Smart. And I just want to share with you one of the things that they found in that community. It doesn't mean it's necessarily 100% applicable, but I think it has some relevance to this community here. People panhandle at intersections along roads and even in shopping centers because other people give them cash. This perpetuates the problem, and in time, it makes it worse. Offering cash does not help a person exit homelessness. Rather, inadvertently conditions the person to return the next day and revalidates the unspoken message that they need to rely on others for survival. That concludes my portion of the presentation. Mr. Patterson will come up and close out. Thank you.
It's a question, Tom. You said you looked at the program in Greenville and then this program in Washington. The Greenville program is only like a year old, correct?
They spent a year researching and collaborating on this and trying to determine, it's complex. And what we understand is panhandling doesn't occur there, but they really worked on it. We looked at other communities, but it's new in terms of the rollout of the giving, relatively new.
Now, did you say it doesn't occur there? Did you say
They don't have the extent of the problem that has been reported by individuals anecdotally, that they don't see that kind of situation with panhandling, although there is a significant homeless population in Greenville, South Carolina.
Okay. Okay, so I was going to ask, how much did they raise? Like, were more people giving to, let's say, those areas that they wanted to give, like to United Way and all those kinds of things?
They have an entity similar to our continuum of care. We do not have that information this time. We hope to get that information. We've talked to the manager's office as well as the lead social human health agency, but at this time I cannot report to you what amount of giving. I will indicate that they've told us that they do have a record of the giving, and we need to get it at some point in time. I've not pressed them for that information at this point in time.
Okay. Last question would be, do you know whether or not they've placed those signs in other places throughout the city? Like, for example, we've got this list of where we know, quote, unquote, homeless people are, but if we're promoting the idea that you can really help panhandlers by giving to these organizations, are we going to put these signs, let's say, on the Riverwalk? Are we going to put them downtown? Are we going to put them everywhere that people can see them? Is this going to be like a public, announcement that we can put on, everywhere, so that if we really want to help the homeless, we do. I guess the challenge I have is, I know that people who come by and see people, well, at least I do, when I see people who are homeless and we want to help, we really want to help. We really do. We really want to help. And I don't know if everybody, for lack of a better term, trusts the agencies that are already supposedly doing that. Okay? So.
That's a good question. In Greenville, South Carolina, the signs are also in downtown. We've discussed the potential of putting signs in other areas, as well as, in some ways, and this is before my time here in the community, we had boxes that people could give to individuals that are homeless. So if you think about this is sort of an advancement of that process. I think there's still a box on Princess Street where individuals could give to support homeless agencies. We will look at other options, and I agree with you. There is a need to communicate to the community-wide and then look at some of those other areas. And we have discussed locations other than these major intersections as placement for these signs. We've not made any decisions at this point in time. We're moving pretty quickly to try to get something before you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
One of the questions that I have, nobody's come up and said, ask this, but it comes from me personally, is what do we know about these people? I recognize immediately a lot of the people who camp over by the library in this park, know them, talk to them. I don't ever see them at the corners. And one of the reasons is, I know two of them personally, they get disability. They get a check. And hopefully with some of the projects that are in the pipeline that are coming along, the small houses and places, they can get used to sleeping in a structure instead of being out. Some of them have been camping in the same spot for a dozen years. Right. And that's kind of like the choice they've made, maybe forced into that choice is a better way of looking at it. But some of these people that I see, I don't see the same faces always at the same intersections. But my question is, they're the cause of why we're having this discussion here today, and we don't know anything about them. Neither you nor I know there's a possibility, and they could be getting $200-300 a day, and you could spend all the money you want to on a program, and they might benefit from it if they need it, but they're going to go right back out there and ply their trade anyway. So I guess my point is, I'm not so sure that everybody that we see out there on the street corners is homeless or
Yep.
is suffering from mental illness. That's as far as I can go. I don't know how to go any further, but I just had to air that.
Councilmember Rivenbark, I would certainly agree with you, and I alluded to it without being really direct. Some panhandlers are truly begging, and there are others that have, I think I said, they found this as an opportunity, sort of a economic opportunity. And then I mentioned earlier that engaging, we need to actually reach out to that population and see what their needs are. And I think part of that is also funding it, resourcing it through some donations perhaps that you can engage this community and determine which of those that are really in dire straits and need that kind of assistance and which ones are simply see this as an opportunity to get money without having to, work for it. It's our hope, though, that as the extent of giving declines and people choose this other way, it becomes a disincentive to go out there and stand on a corner. If you're not getting resources, then it doesn't make sense. But the more you receive, we know that the more people are going to continue to show up at those intersections.
And those resources that you're alluding to, Tom, they have to get to those people, not just to the community at large. Otherwise, we're just whistling Dixie here.
Absolutely.
Thank
Would
you.
agree. Thank you.
Tom, to Charlie's point, in respect to who the individuals that we're looking at here, which are the ones at the intersections, I know that in the continuum of care, every year they do a point and count. They go out once a year and they try to identify all the areas in the community where there's woods and what have you. And, meet up with these people and find out their profiles, what's causing them to be in the woods for as long as they have been. Are they been there for more than 2 years? Is it something less than 2 years, which are the chronically homeless? I like to ask the continuum of care or the people that are doing this kind of work, if they would go out and evaluate the people that are on these corners to get a better idea of who we're dealing with. Are we dealing with somebody that has a drug addiction or alcohol addiction, which is, I'm surmising that that's what we're dealing with here on these intersections. It might be totally wrong. I'm sure there's folks out there that probably do need some money. But I'm beginning to feel that that's what I'm seeing. But we don't know that unless we have the evaluation done from the folks that do this work. And if it means that we have to just kick in a couple extra dollars to help that, let's do it. But we've got the intersections identified. We see them during the day, and we have no information on these individuals at all.
Sounds good.
I think we just need a better understanding of what we're dealing with, because if it's a drug and alcohol addiction issue, it's a pretty serious issue. These folks need it. We're going to continue to do it. And there's got to be ways that, I know in one of the presentations that Mr. Euler was referring to was if the folks were on drugs, was an avenue that we could use to remove some of the folks from those intersections if that's the case. And I would imagine that takes a lot of resources to identify, are they getting the money to go get drugs or what have you. So I'd like to have a better understanding, as Charlie indicated, as to who these individuals are.
Serving on the Council of Governments, when we do our budget, that particular category comes up, and the lady who runs that, I asked her point blank, I said, when we do those counts, and I've helped on 2 occasions do the counting, and I don't want to call it hit and miss, but by our own admission, sometimes our counts might be 50% because they're just difficult to get to. I mean, there are camps out there with 300 people living in them. So it's, to the mayor's point, that needs to be done. We know where these people are. We haven't got to go out and search for them.
Right.
So,
Yes,
thank you, Tom.
Mr. Mayor,
Spears? Go ahead.
yeah, I want to piggyback off of what you said about this. There are a few things that I want to say. I understand the severity of the panhandling issue combined with the homeless population issue. But I also feel, and I understand the complaints that we're getting from our citizens. But to me, this seems a little, it doesn't seem like we have it all together. this presentation. We don't have it all together. We haven't done the necessary work to address this issue. It seems a little premature. It seems a little rushed, like we're just trying to do something to appease the conversations that we're having from citizens who are making these complaints. And then for us to take this directive based only talking to a few council members, everybody wasn't consulted about this directive that we were going in concerning panhandling, and I mean I feel slighted by it, to be honest. So I don't know who to place the blame on, but just to be honest, I don't like it at all. Which council members were consulted to come up with this presentation as to what direction we're going in concerning the panhandling issue that we have in our city? Because nobody talked to me. Now, I did talk to Tony on Friday, but I wasn't consulted by any staff member concerning what we were planning to do concerning panhandling.
Yeah. Kevin, I don't believe, I know that 3 council members had met with the city attorney and the city manager and Jared, at their request, with the full knowledge that this was going to be a presentation that was going to be brought forward to the entire council so that we could have a much broader discussion about it. And that's what we're here to do. Obviously, this has been an ongoing situation for many, many years in regards to the homelessness, and now we're dealing with panhandling. But I do feel that in the respect of the panhandlers, especially the ones in these intersections that we're seeing, if the issue is that, and we can find that information and get that information from the providers that are out there helping in the community as to what the specific needs are for these folks, and if it is alcohol related or drug related, obviously, you know, New Hanover County working with Trillium is putting in this 228-bed facility, of which part of it will be for wet. It's a wet facility where if somebody's drinking or what have you, they can take them there immediately. The police department can do that immediately. Or if it's something to do with drugs and addiction to drugs or alcohol, there's opportunities there to take people there with no insurance, which is a very big thing for us. And that thing, I believe, is going to be opening up in October. So there's resources that are being built in the community, but we also have to identify what the issue is specific to these folks that are out there in the community. So I don't think it was in any way, shape, or form any way to slight any of us. I wasn't involved in it, but I was aware of it because the city manager shared that with us, but also with the opportunity for us to delve into this thing to have much broader discussion and debate on it. Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor and Mr. Spears, I want to emphasize, first of all, those 3 members with whom staff members met were just expressing their concern about the panhandling situation as it exists today. It was up to the staff to come back with a response, and we tried to do that in a more comprehensive way. This may seem a little bit like ready, aim, fire, and it is simply because we're trying to get something put together so that council can give us some feedback on that and simply give us direction as to what we need to do. If there are additional things or lesser things that the council would like to see, we certainly would love to hear that in terms of comment and feedback, and then we'll go away and come back with a more polished up plan, if you will.
But this is my feedback, Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir.
Can I guess, John, can I ask a question? I understand that on the right-of-way, since it's a public right-of-way, somebody can walk up and down a public right-of-way with the sign in their hand, no matter what that sign is. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is protected speech.
Okay, so if they're in the middle of a medium, where we have the concrete mediums, and I've seen this at College and Independence, or I'm sorry, Oleander and Independence, when they're literally in the medium, is that also considered public right-of-way?
It is part of the public right-of-way, yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Even though it could impinge, or in the sight lines being able to make turns, it could affect somebody's, the traffic flow there, it's still allowed.
It is protected speech. There are ordinances all around the nation that forbid it, and the First Amendment says it's protected. And in order for us to have an ordinance that the courts would support, we will have to show in our area under the Fourth Circuit, we'll have to show that we tried these non-speech related laws and they just were inadequate to meet the legitimate end that we were after. It's a process that will take time if it ever is justifiable.
All right, so the other question, the individual that I saw had like a seat, or I'd say a 5-gallon bucket that he turned over, he could sit on it. So you could sit in the right of way and do the same thing. That's not public safety for him.
The courts have accepted that it's a public safety issue. They have simply said that it's outweighed by the First Amendment, and that in order to regulate it, you must narrowly tailor your response. You can't overburden speech. You can't underburden. You can't be under-inclusive. And it's funny you say the bucket. What got Reynolds v. Middleton to the Fourth Circuit is they had an ordinance that said you could not stand in a median, so the panhandlers started sitting in the median. And they amended their ordinance to say you can't be there at all, and that's what was struck down by the Fourth Circuit.
You know, there are medians and then there are medians. I mean, some medians are natural, they're grass, like along College Road, south of Wilmington. And then you've got 18-inch wide medians that are there merely just to deter one car from getting over into an oncoming lane. But, I mean, it's a stretch to call that a sidewalk or what have you. And I guess that's where the detail of the court decisions comes into play. But, I mean, there are so many service trucks plying our roads on a daily basis with extended mirrors. And when those lights are green, I mean, the people do their business when the lights are red. They're walking up and down the median trying to, you know, get people to donate to them. But when those lights are green, I mean, people are going through there 35 to 50 miles an hour. And I think I asked this question of you. If somebody hits somebody, the person that hits them is got to hire a lawyer and go to court.
That is absolutely correct. And Councilmember, you just hit all of the nails on the head. The courts have struggled with exactly what you're talking about. The size of the medians do come into play. Reynolds v. Middleton was an ordinance that banned it countywide. And the court said one of the things that could be done to narrowly tailor it, once you've tried other means, would be to focus on areas where the safety issues are the greatest or are certainly a much stronger issue there. Some medians are 8 foot wide. Other medians are 8 inches wide. There's clearly a difference there. We need to use what we have and be able to show data here in the Fourth Circuit. And then if that is not adequate, then we absolutely can build a case to focus on some of those medians. Sometimes we would limit it to certain times. The more you narrowly tailor it to focus on exactly what your significant and legitimate government interest is, the more likely the courts are to uphold it. And Councilmember, First Amendment law is highly fact-specific. It's one of the most difficult areas of law because you change one tiny fact and you get a completely different ruling from the courts.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah, this is an issue that's important to me because it's obviously an issue that everyone sees every day, whether you're a resident of the city of Wilmington or you're visiting. And the answer to the issue is most certainly not to just turn a blind eye, do nothing, and sit on our hands. So it certainly is an issue that's important to me. I think it's important to note and for council to recognize that no action can be taken without it being in front of all 7 of us. So that's happening right now and tomorrow, of course. But I do want to take a moment to commend the city staff for recognizing the significance of the issue as well as their sensitivity to the fact that it's multifaceted by nature. And communicating to our residents and recognizing that we're not a cold-hearted community, but by communicating to the residents of the city that we can better leverage our dollar by donating to, as Mr. Patterson said, the constellation of nonprofits that are extremely well-equipped to care for these folks and also ensure that the people who really actually need the help are receiving it. While also realizing on the other end of that facet that we have legitimate ordinances currently on the books that can be enforced and should be enforced, as our city attorney and Chief Euler both brought forward. So I look forward, and I think we're taking a proactive approach to this issue, and the city of Wilmington is taking the initiative as a leader in our community, in our greater region, and helping the people that really need it in a truly sustainable manner. So I'm enjoying the conversation, and I truly commend the staff on putting together something that's appropriate.
Mayor, yeah, I agree with Luke, and just want to say to the staff, as we look at this issue, continue to remember it is multifaceted. I think that's the major key word for today, that it's multifaceted, because if I interview, let's say, John on the corner today, I'll get his information, but then John may not be at that corner tomorrow, and there may be Jill at that corner, and each one's scenario, each one's lifestyles and all that's going to be totally different, you know. There's a term we use in theology. They call it, the idea is you're feeding the bears, and when you provide ministry, the goal is, like, for example, if you just show up in a spot and you take out food and give it to bears, okay, they learn to come back to that spot every day to get the meal that you're going to serve, okay? Like my niece has a cat in New York that was homeless. He's not homeless anymore because she put out some milk and some catnip nibbles, and he comes every day to get that. Well, the goal is not just to feed, quote unquote, the bears, but it's to provide services so that that bear will not have to feed off of what I give him, but learn to feed himself. You get it? And so I think it's really important then that as we look at the root causes, that we give to some of these programs that are reaching out and really making a difference in the lives of people that are struggling with a variety of issues. So I just think that we just got to continue to think about it and make sure that we recognize that it's a multifaceted approach we got to take, and dealing with root causes, which is part of what I hope we do. All right, thank you.
One more thing, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure that my words aren't misconstrued. No, not taking a dig at staff. I'm just saying, I'm just looking at it holistically. I understand that there is an issue, and it is multifaceted, and we have to we have to do our due diligence to correctly solve the issue. That's what I'm saying. And you can't get there from just talking to a part of the council. And so if the directive was taken by just talking to a few members and now we're here, that's understood. But we know there are some other instances where there's some concern, and I use myself as an example, and it's like, instead of, well, councilman, let's bring it to all seven. Okay, and sometimes that's not necessarily what needs to be done. We can take an action there. But if we can come up with a plan based on only talking to a few council members, and here we are at a presentation, you know, law enforcement, judicial side of things, and getting information or research from another city, I feel a type of way about it. That's all I'm saying. So y'all can take that however you want to take it.
Thank you, Councilman, for all of your input. I want to conclude very briefly with 5 immediate action items that staff have prepared to bring to council, and of course your feedback enhances and supplements these as well. So just as a way to conclude our presentation today, immediate action items that the city is able to take right now to help be responsive on this issue would be to enforce our existing laws that are associated with panhandling, understanding that panhandling in and of itself is not something that the city is able to regulate. direct resources to those enforcement efforts, partner with the community to provide a simple and easy way to donate to nonprofits that support those in need, understanding that giving to these programs leverages our dollars to do more and to go farther, and that giving to these programs provides for needs of individuals in a sustainable and a more holistic way. In this, what we would be seeking to do is to activate the compassion in our community to help grow our community of care, those nonprofits. Fourth, communicating to the public through signs, website, engagement of stakeholders. The draft that you saw earlier in the presentation is a better way to give sustainable support that makes a real difference. And then finally, identifying opportunities to enhance street outreach that is taking place right now in the community so that we can direct those in need from the street to social support services, and certainly council feedback enhances these action items as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Jared. Are there any further comments from council?
Just one, Bill. I know that Tom alluded to the fact they're putting together more data, more information. Is that right, Tom? Yeah. At some point, I'd like for a similar presentation to be made at a council meeting.
We're going to make this same presentation tomorrow night.
Okay, great. I wasn't aware of that.
We wanted to get your questions out of the way, fine-tune anything, and then make that presentation so that it would be heard by as wide an audience as possible.
Thank you.
That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, we need a closed session.
Yeah, we do have a good closed session. Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. Is there a motion to enter into a closed session pursuant to the provisions of General Statute 143-31811, A's and 6, in order for the City Council to, number one, consider the qualifications, competence, fitness, performance, and conditions of employment of a public officer or employee? We have a motion made by Councilman Rivenbark, second by Councilmember Barnett. We'll take a vote now. Councilman Rivenbark, how do you vote? How do you vote, Mr. Barnett? How do you vote, Mr. Spears?
Aye.
Okay, how do you vote, Mr. Waddell? Mr. Waddell? And the chair is aye. We will now go into closed we're going to go into closed session in the city manager's conference room downstairs, and then we will vacate or exit, close the meeting from that same location when we are concluded. Okay? With that, we will now go into closed session.